Have you ever tried to save someone, ma'am, who didn't want to be saved? You called it love, they called it control. You called it healing, they called it weakness. But here's the truth. Sometimes what looks like addiction is actually narcissism in disguise. And what looks like devotion is just self-destruction wearing compassion's mask. We often think of addiction as something that lives in the body, a craving for a substance, a habit we can't break, a chemical we can't resist. But there's another kind of addiction that doesn't come from a bottle or a pill. It comes from a place much deeper, the need to be seen, to be chosen, to be enough. For many of us, the addiction to approval begins so quietly that we mistake it for love. We think we're just being kind, compassionate, understanding, but underneath those words is a deeper truth. We've learned to equate being loved with being useful. The narcissist senses that. It's like they can smell the wound before you even name it. They find the part of you that aches to be validated and they feed it just enough attention to keep you close. They tell you you're special, that no one understands them the way you do. And at first, it feels intoxicating. You feel chosen, seen in a way you've never been seen before. It's not until much later that you realize you were never truly seen at all. You were being studied, measured, and molded into the version of yourself that would serve them best. You start to chase those moments of approval the way an addict chases a high. You replay their compliments in your head, trying to figure out what you did right that day, what you said that made them smile. And when they pull away, you try harder. You change your tone, your boundaries, your needs. You shrink, thinking that maybe if you just give a little more, love will come back. That's how the cycle begins. A reward followed by withdrawal. An affection followed by silence. The unpredictability of it hooks your nervous system like a drug. You start believing that if you can just fix the tension, if you can just make them happy again, everything will go back to how it was. But the truth is, it never goes back, because approval isn't love, it's a leash. And as long as you're chasing it, you're giving away the power to define your worth. The narcissist doesn't have to beg for control, they simply make you crave it. They withhold validation until you become dependent on it. Breaking that pattern feels impossible at first because the withdrawal isn't just emotional, it's chemical. Your brain has learned to associate their approval with safety, their attention with belonging. But real healing begins the moment you recognize that what you're addicted to was never love at all. It was survival. You were doing what you had to do to feel wanted, to feel like you mattered, and there is no shame in that. The shift happens when you start giving yourself the approval you've been begging for from others. When you stop waiting for someone else to tell you that you're enough and you begin to believe it on your own. That's when the addiction loses its grip. Because the moment you stop chasing approval, you start attracting respect, and that's the beginning of freedom. A narcissist doesn't truly see you. They see what they can extract from you. In the beginning, it feels magical, almost spiritual. Their attention feels like sunlight, and you bloom under it. They look at you like you're extraordinary, like they've finally found someone who understands them in ways no one else ever has. You think, this is connection. You think you found someone who sees your soul. But slowly and almost invisibly, the energy shifts. The admiration turns into expectation. The warmth turns into entitlement. The reflection that once felt so beautiful begins to feel like a trap. What's really happening is that the narcissist has built a mirror out of you. Every compliment they give, every gesture of closeness, is designed to keep that mirror polished. As long as you reflect their greatness, their importance, their perfection, you are safe in their world. But the moment you crack the image, the moment you express a need, disagree, or show emotion that doesn't feed their ego, they shatter the connection. You'll see a side of them that's cold, dismissive, sometimes cruel. It's not because they stopped loving you, it's because you stopped being useful to their reflection. The relationship becomes a performance. You, playing the part of their admirer, and them, basking in the glow of your attention. They feed on your reactions, your laughter, your praise, even your pain. Every tear confirms their power. Every apology reaffirms their control. And the more you give, the less they value it. It's a paradox that keeps you dizzy. You keep trying to prove your worth to someone who only values what you reflect back at them. Over time, you start to lose your own reflection. You look in the mirror and see fragments of yourself that don't feel familiar anymore. You start to think that maybe you are too sensitive, too needy, too emotional, because that's what... And they tell you when you stop playing the role they wrote for you. That confusion is part of the spell. The narcissist doesn't want you to see who you are. They want you to see yourself only through their eyes. But here's the truth they never want you to realize. When you stop being their mirror, they lose their power. Their identity depends on your attention, your silence, your detachment, your refusal to participate. Those things break the illusion. And yes, they will punish you for it. They'll withdraw affection, twist the story, play the victim. They'll do anything to make you pick up the mirror again. Healing begins when you decide to let that mirror fall. When you choose to stop proving, explaining, performing, you begin to understand that love isn't supposed to feel like constant self-erasure. True love doesn't demand that you disappear in order to be seen, and when you finally walk away, you realize something profound. They never truly saw you because they were too busy admiring themselves, but now finally you can begin to see yourself again. You said, when you finally try to walk away from a narcissist, it doesn't feel like relief at first. It feels like withdrawal. It's not just emotional, it's physical. Your body aches, your thoughts race, your heart feels restless. You find yourself missing them even after everything they've done. You replay the good moments over and over, convincing yourself that maybe it wasn't that bad, maybe it could still be fixed. That's not weakness. That's the symptom of a bond created through chaos. Just like an addict craves the very thing that's destroying them, you start craving the person who caused the pain. The narcissist knows this. They build that dependency intentionally. They condition your nervous system to respond to their approval like a drug, unpredictable, inconsistent, powerful. One day they shower you with affection, the next day they pull away without warning. That inconsistency keeps you hooked because your brain starts associating love with the rush of uncertainty. You're not addicted to the person, you're addicted to the pattern. The highs and lows become your emotional roller coaster, and every brief moment of peace feels like a reward you've earned after surviving the storm. When they go silent or withdraw, you panic. You reach out, apologize, over-explain, anything to bring back that fleeting warmth. You tell yourself that if you can just make things right, the love will return. But what you don't realize is that the love you're trying to restore was never real connection. It was control dressed up as care. The narcissist doesn't love, they manage. They regulate your behavior by giving and taking away affection at will. It's not intimacy, it's manipulation that trains you to equate suffering with significance. The hardest part is that when you start to detach, the emptiness feels unbearable. You start to believe that maybe you can't live without them. It's because they've made you dependent not just emotionally, but neurologically. Every time you get a text from them, your brain releases dopamine, the same chemical released by addiction. Every time they ignore you, your cortisol spikes. It becomes a biological tug of war, and breaking free feels like tearing away from your own skin. But withdrawal is also a sign of healing. It's your body relearning peace. It's your mind detoxing from the illusion. The silence that once felt like punishment becomes the space where you can finally hear yourself again. The emptiness that once terrified you becomes the ground where your strength starts to grow back. Recovery doesn't happen in one clean break, it happens in moments. Each time you resist reaching out, each time you sit with the discomfort instead of running back, you reclaim a piece of yourself that was stolen. Eventually, the craving fades. The chaos no longer feels like home. And one day you wake up and realize you don't miss them. You miss the version of you that believed love could save them. That's when you know you're free. You're no longer waiting for the next high. You're finally learning to live in peace. We grow up believing that love means helping, fixing, healing, that if someone is broken and we love them enough, they'll transform. So when we meet a narcissist, our empathy becomes our open door. We see their pain, their past, their wounds, and we tell ourselves that maybe we were sent to love them into wholeness. It sounds noble, even spiritual. But what we don't realize at first is that narcissists don't want to heal. They want an audience. They don't seek growth. They seek admiration. They don't need a partner. They need a mirror that reflects back the version of themselves they wish to believe in. When you try to help a narcissist, they let you. At first, they tell you stories of how others wronged them, how misunderstood they've always been. You feel compassion, you feel purpose, and they feel power. They've found someone who will carry the weight of their ego while calling it love. Every time you soothe them, defend them, or explain away their cruelty, you confirm to them that their behavior has no consequence. You become their emotional caretaker, their rescuer, their supply. What you call helping, they experience as control, because to them, every act of care is an opportunity to manipulate. The illusion of fixing them becomes your trap. You start believing that if you just love them the right way, they'll finally change. You hold on through the lies, the manipulation, the emotional outbursts, because you've seen glimpses of who they could be. But those glimpses were never real. They were performances designed to keep you invested, to make sure you don't leave. The more you give, the less they respect you. The more patient you become, the more they push your limits. It's never about your effort, it's about their control. Eventually, you start to feel exhausted. You pour out energy that never seems to fill them. You keep fixing problems that keep appearing in different disguises. You begin to notice that every conversation somehow ends up being about them, their pain, their needs, their perspective. Your feelings become secondary, almost invisible. You start to shrink to keep the peace. You tell yourself you're being understanding, but really, you're disappearing. The truth is, you cannot heal someone who benefits from staying broken. Their wounds are their power. They use them to justify their manipulation, to demand your sympathy, to keep you trapped in cycles of guilt and obligation. Healing them would mean losing control, and control is their lifeline. Freedom begins the moment you stop trying to rescue them. It's not coldness, it's clarity. You finally understand that saving them isn't your purpose. Saving yourself is. The greatest act of love you can offer a narcissist is to walk away, because your absence forces them to face what they've spent their whole life avoiding, their own emptiness. You were never meant to be their healer. You were meant to be your own. Detachment is often misunderstood. People think it means shutting down, becoming cold, or not caring anymore, but true detachment isn't about building walls. It's about breaking chains. It's choosing clarity over chaos, peace over persuasion. When you've been entangled with a narcissist, your entire emotional compass becomes centered around their reactions. You start measuring your worth by how calm they are, how kind they are that day, how they look at you. Their approval becomes your weather. It dictates whether you feel safe or stormy, and that's exactly how they keep control. The narcissist thrives on emotional dependency. They want you invested in every sigh, every silence, every shift in mood. The more you react, the more they know they own your attention. So detachment becomes your rebellion. It's the moment you stop dancing to their rhythm and start hearing your own. It's not easy, because at first, detachment feels wrong. You've been trained to overthink, to fix, to please. Silence feels like punishment. Peace feels unnatural. But that's how you know you've been conditioned. You've confused love with responsibility and control with connection. When you begin to detach, the narcissist will panic. They'll sense the shift before you even say a word. Suddenly, they'll try to pull you back in, maybe with affection, maybe with rage, maybe with guilt. They might remind you of the good times or accuse you of being heartless. They'll do anything to make you feel something again, because when you stop reacting, their power begins to fade. That's the paradox. To them, indifference is more threatening than confrontation. You could argue for hours and they'd still feel victorious because at least they still have your attention. But the moment you become calm, steady, unbothered, they lose control. Detachment doesn't mean you stop feeling, it means you stop absorbing. You begin to see their behavior as a reflection of them, not a judgment of you. You stop internalizing their cruelty, their silence, their chaos. You learn to observe without reacting, to listen without losing yourself, to walk away without explaining. It's an act of strength, quiet, steady, powerful. You'll notice something beautiful as you practice this. The noise inside your mind starts to quiet down. The self-blame fades. You begin to recognize your own thoughts again, your preferences, your desires, your voice. The space that once belonged to their moods now becomes your sanctuary. You start making choices from peace, not from fear. You stop needing to be understood by someone who never intended to understand you. Freedom begins where guilt ends, and guilt will scream as you let go. It will tell you that you're being cruel, selfish, unkind. But the truth is, detachment is not cruelty, it's clarity. It's saying, I can love you and still choose myself. It's understanding that your responsibility is not to hold their world together, but to hold your own center steady. The day you detach, you don't lose love. You reclaim it, and this time, it finally belongs to you. Recovery after narcissistic abuse doesn't start the day you leave them. It starts the day you begin to remember who you were before them. For so long, your identity becomes entangled in their perception of you. You've been told who you are, what you're worth, how you should feel. You've lived on the edge of their moods, their needs, their narratives. You forget what it feels like to simply exist without defending, explaining, or proving yourself. When the noise of their control finally fades, what's left behind is silence. And that silence can feel terrifying, but that's where recovery begins, in the quiet, where you finally start to hear your own voice again. At first, you might not recognize yourself. You might look in the mirror and see someone tired, anxious, unsure. You might miss the intensity, even the chaos, because it once gave you a sense of purpose. The narcissist made you believe that love had to be earned through struggle, that peace meant boredom, that your worth depended on your usefulness. So when peace finally arrives, it feels empty. That's normal. It's what happens when your nervous system has been wired for survival instead of safety. Healing, then, isn't about forgetting them. It's about retraining your body and mind to feel safe without their presence. Slowly, you start remembering small things, what music you like, what makes you laugh, what it feels like to relax without waiting for the next explosion. You begin to rediscover your own rhythms, your own needs, your own dreams. You start seeing that your worth was never something they could give or take away. It was always yours, buried under layers of manipulation and fear. The more you connect with that truth, the less power their memory holds. There comes a point in your recovery when you stop asking, "Why did they do this to me?" and start asking, "Why did I stay so long?" That's Ning. But self-blame, it's self-understanding. It's the moment you begin to see that the parts of you that loved them weren't foolish. They were hopeful, loyal, compassionate. You didn't love wrong. You just loved someone who used your goodness as a weapon. Recognizing that truth doesn't make you weak, it makes you wise. The final stage of recovery is forgiveness, not for them, but for yourself. Forgiving yourself for not knowing sooner, for trying too hard, for staying too long. You realize that every version of you, the one who fought, who cried, who doubted, who left, was doing their best to survive. That realization turns pain into wisdom. And one day, without even noticing, you wake up lighter. You no longer measure your worth through someone else's eyes. You no longer crave their validation or fear their silence. You start to live again, not to prove, not to please, but simply to be. That's what recovery truly is. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of yourself. You were never addicted to them. You were searching for you. And now, you've finally been found.